The scent of coffee pulled Eliza from sleep, but it wasn't the familiar aroma from her own kitchen. Her head pounded as consciousness returned, and she blinked against the unfamiliar surroundings: plain walls, a modest dresser, and a window with blinds that didn't quite block the morning sun. When she sat up, the oversized button-down shirt she was wearing slipped off one shoulder. It wasn't hers. The events of last night were a blur, but one thing was certain: this wasn't her penthouse apartment. The door creaked open, and there stood Marcus, her executive assistant, holding a mug of coffee and wearing an expression that mixed concern with unmistakable awkwardness. "Good morning, Ms. Reynolds," he said quietly. "I thought you might need this. If you're wondering how a high-powered CEO ended up in her employee's guest room wearing nothing but his shirt, and what happens when professional boundaries collapse under the weight of unexpected circumstances, stay with me. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to catch more stories that explore how life's most complicated moments often lead to its most meaningful connections. Marcus Chen had perfected the art of the morning routine. At 5:30 a.m., his alarm would sound, and he'd silence it before it completed its first ring, a habit formed from years of ensuring his daughter, Lily, could sleep undisturbed for those precious extra minutes. By 5:45, he'd showered and dressed. At 6 o'clock, he'd prepare Lily's lunch, and by 6:30, breakfast would be on the table, the scent of whatever he was cooking gently rousing his 10-year-old from sleep. This morning was no different. Marcus whisked eggs in a bowl, adding a splash of milk and a pinch of salt. Lily liked her scrambled eggs fluffy, and he'd become an expert at making them just right. The toast popped up from the toaster, and he quickly buttered it before it cooled. "Dad?" Lily appeared in the doorway, her dark hair a tangled mess, still in her space-themed pajamas. "Is someone in our guest room?" Marcus froze, spatula in hand. "What? No, of course not. I heard someone moving around in there when I went to the bathroom." Marcus set down the spatula and turned off the stove burner. "Stay here," he said, trying to keep his voice casual. "The eggs are almost ready." He walked down the hallway of their modest three-bedroom house, his mind racing. Had someone broken in? But there had been no signs of forced entry, and their security system hadn't been triggered. He approached the guest room door and listened. Sure enough, he could hear movement inside, the rustle of bed sheets, a soft groan. Cautiously, he pushed the door open. Eliza Reynolds, CEO of Meridian Technologies and his direct boss for the past 3 years, was sitting on the edge of the bed, her head in her hands. She wore nothing but one of his dress shirts, her long legs bare, her usually perfect blonde hair disheveled. "Ms. Reynolds," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She looked up, her blue eyes widening with confusion, then recognition, then unmistakable horror. "Marcus," she said, her voice hoarse. "Where am I? What happened last night?" The previous evening had been the company's annual charity gala. As Eliza's executive assistant, Marcus had been responsible for coordinating much of the event, ensuring everything ran smoothly while Eliza networked with potential investors and donors. He'd watched her work the room with her usual grace and confidence, champagne glass in hand, laughing at the right moments, asking the right questions. What he hadn't anticipated was finding her in the parking garage after the event, sitting on the ground beside her car, keys in hand but clearly in no condition to drive. "Ms. Reynolds," he'd approached cautiously. "Is everything all right?" She'd looked up at him, her makeup slightly smudged, her eyes glassy. "Marcus. My reliable Marcus. Always showing up when needed. Have you been drinking?" "Just a few glasses," she'd said, attempting to stand but wobbling on her heels. "I'm fine to drive." "I don't think that's a good idea," he'd said firmly. "Let me call you a car service." "No," she'd said, suddenly serious. "No cars. No drivers. No one can see me like this." Marcus had understood immediately. Eliza Reynolds had a reputation to maintain. She was known for her composure, her control. Being seen intoxicated would damage the image she'd carefully cultivated. "I'll drive you home," he'd offered. "Can't go home," she'd mumbled. "Richard might be there." Richard was her ex-husband, a prominent attorney whose very public affair with his paralegal had made tabloid headlines 6 months ago. The divorce had been finalized just weeks earlier. "He has some papers to drop off," she'd continued. "Can't see me like this. Can't let him see me, affected." Marcus had made a quick decision. "I'll take you to my place. You can stay in the guest room until you're feeling better." Now, in the cold light of morning, that decision felt much more complicated. "You were in no condition to drive after the gala," Marcus explained, handing Eliza the coffee. "And you didn't want to go home because your ex might be there." Eliza took the mug, her hands trembling slightly. "And the shirt?" Marcus felt heat rise to his face. "Your dress was, well, it's not exactly comfortable sleepwear. I gave you the shirt and left you to change." "I promise I didn't." "I believe you," she cut him off, taking a sip of coffee. "You're not that type of man, Marcus." The fact that she knew what type of man he was made him uncomfortable. Their relationship had always been strictly professional. He knew how she took her coffee, which clients irritated her, and which board members she trusted. She knew he was efficient, detail-oriented, and never missed a deadline. But personal details? Those had always remained carefully separated. Until now. "Dad?" Lily's voice called from the hallway. "The eggs are getting cold." Eliza's eyes widened. "You have a child?" "A daughter," Marcus confirmed. "Lily. She's 10. I didn't know you were married." "I'm not. Not anymore." He hesitated. "My wife died 4 years ago. Cancer." Something shifted in Eliza's expression, surprise, followed by a softening he'd never seen before. "I'm sorry. I had no idea." "It's not something I talk about at work," he said simply. "Look, your clothes from last night are in the bathroom. Why don't you get dressed, and I'll make you some breakfast. Then I can drive you home." Eliza nodded, setting down the coffee mug. "Thank you, Marcus. I appreciate your discretion about all this." "Of course," he said, turning to leave. "And Marcus," she called after him. "I'm sorry about your wife." He nodded once, then closed the door behind him. Explaining Eliza's presence to Lily proved easier than expected. "This is Ms. Reynolds," he told his daughter as Eliza emerged from the guest room, now dressed in her gala attire from the night before, a sleek black dress that looked decidedly out of place at their breakfast table. "She works with me, and her car broke down near our house last night, so I offered her our guest room." Lily, ever perceptive, looked between them with narrowed eyes but seemed to accept the explanation. "Did you sleep okay? Dad says that bed is lumpy, but we never have guests so he hasn't bought a new mattress." "It was perfectly comfortable," Eliza said, offering Lily a smile that seemed genuine, if a bit strained. "Your dad was very kind to help me out." Marcus served Eliza a plate of eggs and toast, along with another cup of coffee. He noticed how she hesitated before taking a bite, as if unaccustomed to such simple fare. At home, she probably had elaborate breakfasts prepared by a personal chef, or maybe she just grabbed a protein shake on her way to the office. The thought made him acutely aware of the differences in their lives. "These eggs are delicious," Eliza said after her first bite, sounding surprised. "Dad makes the best eggs," Lily agreed. "He says the secret is patience." "Is that so?" Eliza looked at Marcus with new interest. "Just a little milk and low heat," he said, embarrassed by the attention. "Nothing special." "Do you cook all the meals?" Eliza asked. "Dad does everything," Lily answered before Marcus could. "He cooks and helps with my homework and comes to all my science fairs, even when he has to work late after. He's the best dad ever." Marcus felt his cheeks warm. Lily, I'm sure Ms. Reynolds isn't interested in. Actually, I find it quite impressive, Eliza interrupted. Managing a household and a demanding career isn't easy. I should know. The comment hung in the air between them, an unexpected moment of connection. Marcus had never considered that Eliza might understand the challenges of his life. In his mind, she'd always been the boss, demanding, exacting, living a life of privilege that bore no resemblance to his own. Lily, you should get ready for school, Marcus said, breaking the moment. The bus will be here in 20 minutes. As Lily disappeared down the hallway, an awkward silence fell over the kitchen. I should get going as well, Eliza said, standing. I need to go home and change before heading to the office. Of course, Marcus said. Let me grab my keys. Actually, Eliza hesitated, would you mind calling me a car service? I think it would be better if we arrived separately. The implication was clear, she didn't want anyone at the office to know she'd spent the night at his home, even innocently. It stung more than it should have. Of course, he said again, his voice carefully neutral. I'll take care of it. At the office, everything returned to normal, almost. Marcus answered Eliza's calls, scheduled her meetings, prepared her briefings. She was her usual efficient self, giving directives in her crisp, authoritative voice. If anyone noticed the slight dark circles under her eyes, concealed with makeup but still visible if you looked closely, they didn't mention it. But something had changed. Marcus found himself noticing things about Eliza he'd never paid attention to before, the way she absently twisted a strand of hair when deep in thought, how she always thanked the cleaning staff by name when they emptied her trash, the slight tremor in her hand when she'd been working too long without eating. And sometimes, he caught her watching him too, with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. A week after the incident, as Marcus had come to think of it, Eliza called him into her office at the end of the day. Close the door, please, she said, not looking up from her computer. Marcus did as instructed, then stood waiting, notepad in hand as always. I wanted to thank you properly, she said, finally meeting his eyes. For your help last week. It was unprofessional of me to put you in that position. It wasn't a problem, he said automatically. It was, though. She leaned back in her chair. I crossed a boundary, and I apologize for that. Apology accepted, though unnecessary. She studied him for a moment. You're very good at maintaining professional distance, aren't you, Marcus? The question caught him off guard. I try to be good at my job. That's not what I asked. She stood and walked around her desk, perching on the edge of it. In the 3 years you've worked for me, I never knew you were a widower raising a daughter alone. Why is that? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. It didn't seem relevant to my work performance. Maybe not. But it's relevant to who you are. She paused. The night of the gala, why did you help me? You could have called a car service, despite my objections. You could have taken me to a hotel. Why bring me to your home? The question had been haunting him as well. You seemed vulnerable, he admitted. I wanted to make sure you were safe. Because I'm your boss? Because you're a person who needed help. Something in her expression softened. You know, Marcus, in my position, it's rare to encounter genuine kindness without agenda. People are nice to me because I'm the CEO, because I can advance their careers or fund their projects. Not because I'm just another human being having a bad night. Marcus didn't know how to respond to that. I'd like to repay your kindness, she continued. Let me take you and Lily to dinner. That's not necessary. I know it's not necessary. I want to. She held up a hand when he began to protest again. Consider it a thank you from a friend, not an obligation from your boss. Friend. The word hung between them, unexpected and strangely significant. Okay, he found himself saying. Lily would like that. And you? Eliza asked, her gaze direct. I would too, he admitted. Dinner was arranged for the following Saturday at a restaurant Marcus would never have chosen himself, an upscale Italian place where the menu didn't list prices, a sure sign it was well beyond his budget. He felt underdressed despite wearing his best shirt, and worried that Lily, in her favorite blue dress with stars on it, might break something expensive. But his concerns faded when Eliza greeted them at the table. Gone was the power suit and perfect makeup of CEO Reynolds. Instead, she wore a simple sundress, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking younger and more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. You look different, Lily blurted out, always honest. Eliza laughed, a genuine sound that Marcus realized he'd rarely heard. Is that a good different or a bad different? Good, Lily decided. You look like a regular person, not like someone who would fire my dad if he messed up. Lily. Marcus hissed, mortified. But Eliza only laughed harder. I promise I have no plans to fire your dad. He's far too valuable. The dinner passed with surprising ease. Eliza asked Lily about school and listened with genuine interest to her detailed explanation of her science project on plant photosynthesis. She shared stories from her own childhood, growing up in a small town in Michigan, working at her parents' hardware store, being the first in her family to go to college. I had no idea you came from such humble beginnings, Marcus said as they waited for dessert, Lily having excused herself to the restroom. It's not something I talk about much in business circles, Eliza admitted. People expect CEOs to come from privilege, to have attended the right schools, known the right people. It's easier to let them believe what they want. Why are you telling me, then? She considered the question. Because you saw me at my worst and treated me with dignity. Because you make incredible scrambled eggs and raised a remarkable daughter on your own. Because sometimes it's exhausting to be CEO Reynolds, and it's nice to just be Eliza for an evening. The honesty in her voice touched something in Marcus. For 3 years, he'd seen her only as his boss, demanding, sometimes difficult, always focused on the bottom line. He'd never considered the weight she carried, the persona she maintained. Well, Eliza, he said, testing her name on his tongue, it's nice to meet you. She smiled, and for a moment, the restaurant around them seemed to fade away. After that dinner, something shifted between them. At work, they maintained their professional roles, she was still the boss, he was still the efficient assistant. But there were small changes, a genuine, "How are you?" in the morning, a shared smile when a particularly difficult client finally signed a contract, the occasional text message asking if Lily had won her science fair. She had. 3 weeks after their dinner, Eliza appeared at Marcus's desk at the end of the day. I need a favor, she said without preamble. Of course, he replied, already reaching for his notepad. Not that kind of favor. She glanced around to ensure no one was within earshot. My sister is in town with her kids this weekend. They're staying at my place, and I promised to take them to the Children's Science Museum on Saturday. I thought, maybe Lily might like to join us. If you're free, of course. The invitation surprised him. Lily would love that. She's been wanting to see their new space exhibit. Great, Eliza said, looking genuinely pleased. I'll text you the details. As she walked away, Marcus found himself wondering what exactly was happening between them. Was this friendship? Something more? And was he ready for either possibility? The Science Museum outing revealed yet another side of Eliza. With her niece and nephew, Emma, 8, and Tyler, 6, she was patient and playful, nothing like the decisive, sometimes intimidating CEO. She listened to their excited explanations, asked questions that made them think, and never check. I'll continue the story from where I left off. The Science Museum outing revealed yet another side of Eliza. With her niece and nephew, Emma, 8, and Tyler, 6, she was patient and playful, nothing like the decisive, sometimes intimidating CEO. She listened to their excited explanations, asked questions that made them think, and never checked her phone once during the entire visit. Lily hit it off immediately with Emma, the two girls racing ahead to examine exhibits while the adults followed with Tyler, who was more interested in pressing every button he could find than reading the explanations. "You're good with them," Marcus observed as they watched Eliza help Tyler understand how a tornado simulator worked. "Kids are easier than board members," she replied with a smile. "They tell you exactly what they're thinking, and they don't have hidden agendas. I never pictured you as the aunt type." "There's a lot you don't know about me, Marcus Chen." Her tone was light, but her eyes held a challenge. "I'm beginning to realize that," he admitted. By the time they reached the space exhibit, Lily was practically vibrating with excitement. She led Emma through the displays, explaining facts about Mars and Jupiter that she'd memorized from her books at home. "Your daughter is incredibly bright," Eliza's sister, Catherine, commented to Marcus. "She reminds me of Eliza at that age, always teaching the rest of us something new." "Lily's always been curious," Marcus said proudly. "Her mother was the same way. She was a research scientist before she got sick." "Eliza mentioned you lost your wife," Catherine said gently. "I'm sorry." Marcus nodded, surprised that Eliza had discussed his personal life with her sister. "It's been 4 years. Lily barely remembers her mom sometimes, which is the hardest part." "You've done an amazing job with her," Catherine said. "And it's nice to see my sister with." She trailed off, seeming to reconsider her words. "With?" Marcus prompted. "With friends outside of work," Catherine finished, but Marcus suspected that wasn't what she'd originally intended to say. "Eliza tends to isolate herself, especially since the divorce. It's good to see her relaxed for once." Marcus glanced at Eliza, who was laughing as Tyler attempted to jump high enough to touch a model of the moon suspended from the ceiling. She caught his eye and smiled, a private moment in the midst of the crowded museum. Something warm unfurled in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a very long time. The museum visit led to other outings, a picnic in the park where Lily taught Eliza how to make daisy chains, a Saturday morning farmers market where Eliza introduced them to the vendor who sold the best peaches in the city, a community theater production of The Wizard of Oz, where they all sang along to Somewhere Over the Rainbow. At work, they maintained their professional relationship, but Marcus began to notice the glances from coworkers, the raised eyebrows when Eliza stopped by his desk to chat rather than simply giving instructions, the whispers that followed when they left the building together after work. "People are talking," he mentioned one evening as they walked to the parking garage, having stayed late to prepare for an important presentation. "Let them talk," Eliza said with a shrug. "Unless it bothers you?" The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken implications. "It doesn't bother me," he said carefully. "But I worry about how it might affect your authority, or my position." Eliza stopped walking and turned to face him. "Marcus, do you think I care what the office gossips say about who I choose to spend my time with?" "You should care," he said quietly. "You've worked hard to build your reputation. The board already scrutinizes your every move since the divorce. If they think you're involved with an employee—" "Are we?" she interrupted. "Involved?" The directness of the question caught him off guard. They'd been dancing around this for weeks, enjoying each other's company, learning about each other's lives, but never putting a name to what was developing between them. "I don't know," he admitted. "Are we?" Eliza took a step closer. "I enjoy spending time with you and Lily. More than I've enjoyed anything in a very long time. But I understand your concerns, and I respect them. If you want to take a step back." "I don't," he said quickly, surprising himself with his certainty. It's complicated." "Life usually is," she said with a small smile. "But sometimes, the complicated things are worth figuring out." She reached out and squeezed his hand briefly, then continued walking toward the parking garage, leaving Marcus to follow, his hand still warm from her touch. The crisis came, as crises often do, without warning. Marcus was at his desk when the call from Lily's school came through. "Mr. Chen? This is Nurse Patel from Westridge Elementary. Lily had an accident during recess. She fell from the monkey bars and we think she may have broken her arm. We've called an ambulance to take her to Memorial Hospital." Marcus's world narrowed to a pinpoint of fear. "I'm on my way," he said, already grabbing his jacket. Eliza was in a board meeting, the quarterly review that had been on the calendar for months. He couldn't interrupt, but he couldn't leave without letting someone know where he was going. He scribbled a note for her assistant and rushed to the elevator. In the hospital waiting room, time seemed to stretch endlessly. The doctors had taken Lily for X-rays, confirming a clean break that would require a cast but no surgery. Still, seeing his daughter's pale face, tears streaking her cheeks, had shaken Marcus to his core. "Dad, it hurts," she'd whimpered, and he'd felt utterly helpless. Now he sat alone, paperwork in his lap, trying to remember if their insurance covered emergency room visits or if this would be another financial strain he'd have to somehow manage. "Marcus." He looked up to find Eliza standing in the waiting room doorway, slightly out of breath as if she'd been running. "What are you doing here?" he asked, stunned. "The board meeting." "Can wait," she finished, crossing to sit beside him. "How's Lily?" "Broken arm. They're putting on a cast now." He ran a hand through his hair. "How did you know we were here?" "Your note said, emergency at Lily's school. I called the school and they told me you'd gone to Memorial." She placed a hand on his arm. "I was worried." The simple admission broke something open inside him. For 4 years, he'd handled every crisis alone, been both mother and father to Lily, never allowing himself to lean on anyone else. Now, sitting in a hospital waiting room with his boss, no, with Eliza, he felt the weight of that solitude crushing down on him. "I was scared," he confessed, his voice rough. "When the school called, all I could think was that I couldn't lose her too." Eliza's arm slipped around his shoulders, and without thinking, he leaned into her embrace, accepting the comfort she offered. "You're not alone, Marcus," she said softly. "Not anymore." When the doctor called them back to see Lily, Eliza stood to leave, but Marcus caught her hand. "Stay," he said. "Please." She nodded, and together they went to see Lily, who was sitting up in bed, her arm now encased in a bright purple cast. "Ms. Reynolds." Lily's face lit up with surprise. "Did you come to sign my cast?" "Absolutely," Eliza said, producing a marker from her purse. "I think I should be the first, don't you?" As Eliza carefully wrote a message on Lily's cast, adding a small heart beside her name, Marcus watched them together and realized that somewhere along the way, this woman had become essential to both of their lives. The hospital visit changed everything. That evening, after getting Lily settled at home with pain medication and her favorite stuffed animal surrounding her, Marcus found himself sitting with Eliza on his back porch, 2 cups of tea growing cold between them. "You left a board meeting," he said, still processing the implications. "For us." "Yes," she said simply. "Why?" Eliza looked at him, her expression open and vulnerable in a way he'd never seen before. "Because in that moment, nothing was more important to me than making sure you and Lily were okay." The admission hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. "I haven't felt this way about anyone since Sarah died," Marcus said quietly. "It terrifies me." "I know," Eliza replied. "After Richard, I promised myself I wouldn't get involved with anyone again. It was easier to be alone than to risk being hurt." She paused. "But then I woke up in your guest room wearing your shirt, and somehow everything changed." Marcus couldn't help but smile at the memory. "Not exactly how I imagined we'd meet outside of work for the first time." "No," she agreed with a soft laugh. "But maybe it was exactly what needed to happen. It broke down the walls between CEO Reynolds and Executive Assistant Chen. It let us see each other as just Eliza and Marcus." "And what do Eliza and Marcus do now?" he asked, his heart racing. In answer, she leaned forward and kissed him, a gentle press of lips that held both question and promise. When she pulled back, her eyes searched his. "That depends," she said. "On what we both want, and whether we're brave enough to reach for it." Marcus touched her cheek, marveling at how natural it felt to do so. "I want to find out where this leads," he said honestly. "But there are complications. Work, Lily, the fact that you're technically my boss." "All true," she acknowledged. "But I've spent my career solving complex problems. This one seems worth the effort, don't you think?" He kissed her again in response, feeling something long dormant within him spring back to life. The following Monday, Marcus arrived at work to find an email from HR requesting a meeting. His stomach dropped. Someone must have seen them together at the hospital, or perhaps leaving his house. He'd known there would be consequences, but he hadn't expected them to come so quickly. When he entered the conference room, he was surprised to find not only the HR director but also Eliza and the company's legal counsel. "Please, sit down, Marcus," Eliza said formally, her CEO persona firmly in place. For a terrible moment, he thought she'd reconsidered everything, that she was about to fire him to avoid complications. "I've asked you here to discuss a change in the reporting structure," she began. "Effective immediately, you'll be transitioning to a new role as Director of Executive Operations, reporting directly to the COO rather than to me." Marcus blinked in surprise. "I don't understand." "It's a promotion," the HR director explained. "With a substantial increase in salary and responsibilities. You'll be overseeing all executive support staff and operations for the C-suite." "We've been considering this reorganization for some time," Eliza continued, her voice professional but her eyes conveying a different message. "Your performance has consistently exceeded expectations, and this move recognizes your contributions while also addressing certain, potential conflicts of interest." Understanding dawned. She was removing the direct reporting relationship between them, eliminating the most problematic aspect of their personal involvement. "The details are all in this packet," the legal counsel said, sliding a folder across the table. "Take some time to review it and let us know if you have any questions." After the meeting, Eliza caught up with him in the hallway. "I should have discussed this with you first," she said quietly. "But I wanted to handle it properly, through official channels." "It's a good solution," he acknowledged. "Though I'll miss working directly with you." "You'll still see plenty of me," she promised with a small smile. "Just not as your boss." The weight that had been pressing on his chest all morning lifted. "Lily will be pleased," he said. "She told me last night that she thinks you're super pretty and that I should definitely kiss you again." Eliza laughed, the sound drawing curious glances from passing employees. "Smart girl," she said. "You should listen to her." 6 months later, Marcus stood in his kitchen, preparing dinner while Lily set the table for three, a configuration that had become increasingly common. Eliza was bringing dessert, having insisted on picking up cheesecake from the bakery they discovered on one of their weekend explorations of the city. The doorbell rang, and Lily raced to answer it, her purple cast long gone but her enthusiasm for Eliza's visits undiminished. "You're here," he heard his daughter exclaim. "Dad made lasagna because he knows it's your favorite." "Is that so?" Eliza's voice carried down the hallway. "Well, I brought cheesecake because I know it's yours." They appeared in the kitchen doorway, Lily clutching a bakery box, Eliza carrying a small overnight bag, another recent development. She crossed to Marcus and kissed him hello, a casual gesture that still made his heart skip. "Something smells amazing," she said, peering at the bubbling lasagna he was removing from the oven. "Dad's been cooking all afternoon," Lily reported. "He said tonight is special." Eliza raised an eyebrow at Marcus. "Special? Should I be concerned?" "Not concerned," he said, setting down the hot dish. "Maybe curious." Dinner passed with the comfortable rhythm they'd established over months of shared meals. Lily dominated the conversation, as usual, detailing her day at school and her plans for an upcoming science project. Eliza listened attentively, asking questions and offering suggestions, while Marcus watched them both, his heart full. After Lily went to bed, Marcus and Eliza settled on the couch, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm around her. "You said tonight was special," she reminded him. Was there a reason, or was Lily exaggerating again? Marcus took a deep breath. "I realized something today. It's been exactly 1 year since you woke up in my guest room wearing my shirt." Eliza laughed softly. "Has it really been a year? I should be embarrassed, but honestly, it might have been the best mistake I ever made." "It changed everything," he agreed. "And it got me thinking about how much has happened since then. How different my life is, how different Lily's life is, because you're in it." He shifted to face her, taking her hands in his. "I know it's only been 6 months since we officially started dating, and maybe this is too soon, but I've never been more certain of anything." Eliza's eyes widened as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I'm not asking you to move in right away, or even to get married right away," he said quickly. "I know we both value our independence, and there are still logistics to figure out. But I want you to know that Lily and I both want you in our lives permanently, whenever you're ready." He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Eliza Reynolds, will you marry me? Not necessarily tomorrow, but someday, when the timing is right for all of us?" Tears filled Eliza's eyes. "Marcus Chen, you continue to surprise me," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you, tomorrow or next year or whenever it feels right. As long as I get to be part of your family." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Marcus thought about how a single unexpected morning, his boss waking up in his guest room wearing only his shirt, had led to this moment of perfect certainty. Life's most complicated situations often led to its most meaningful connections, and he couldn't wait to see where this one would take them next. If you enjoyed this story of unexpected love and second chances, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that remind us how life's most awkward moments can sometimes lead to our greatest happiness. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from the most unexpected situations. Thanks for watching.